Chapter 61. Qu Wenbiao is not just the principal. His only relative is his son who is studying abroad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Unclosed case. Seeing these three words, Taiwan Novel Network. Su Ming narrowed his eyes immediately and clicked on the case without hesitation to check it out, because normal criminal cases basically have a certain closing time, which is roughly 3 to 6 months. If the case remains unclosed, it means that it has not been handled or cannot be handled, which is something that the police station will never allow, of course. There is also a special exception, that is, homicide. If a homicide case is always unclosed, it undoubtedly means that the murderer has not been found. There is no way to force the case to be closed. But over the years, because of various advanced criminal investigation methods and the emergence of surveillance sky eyes, there are very few unclosed homicide cases. If averaged out, a city may not have one in several years. So, this case in Gusu City where the murderer has not been found, private cinema potassium cyanide murder case, undoubtedly made Su Ming curious and surprised. When he was about to check the file, Su Ming suddenly paused, and couldn't help but think of what Shogo had said. That man didn't answer Brother Tai-san, he just squatted down and took out a small syringe from his pocket and sleeve. Insert it directly into Brother Tai-san's mother's arm, and inject the liquid in it gently and tenderly. In less than 3 minutes, Brother Tai-san saw his mother stop breathing with his own eyes. Thinking of what Shogo said, looking at this murder case in Gusu City that has not been solved so far, potassium cyanide. Su Ming can now roughly determine that the member of the drug trafficking organization in Gusu City is likely to have injected potassium cyanide into Tai-san's mother. Only in this way can she stop breathing in just 3 minutes. And, the deceased recorded in the current file is definitely not Tai-san's mother. The places where the crimes occurred are also very different. But the methods of committing the crimes are almost identical. They all use highly toxic substances such as potassium cyanide to poison the victims in a very short time, but the problem is, the drug dealer in Gusu killed Tai-san's mother to threaten Tai-san. Then why did he kill this victim? And looking at the time of the crime, even before a large amount of high-purity heroin was discovered, there was no murder and robbery. Thinking of this, Su Ming suddenly froze, and had already thought of some extremely terrifying possibilities. He immediately walked to the whiteboard, he picked up a marker and wrote down the time points recorded in these files in Gusu City, in May 4 years ago. The Gusu police discovered that a small amount of high-purity drugs were circulating in the market. In July 4 years ago, a potassium cyanide murder occurred in a private cinema in Gusu City, and the murderer has not been found yet. In August 4 years ago, a large number of high-purity drugs began to appear in the drug market in Gusu. The police found a full 500 grams of heroin on a wooden boat. In January 3 years ago, the henchmen under the drug trafficking organization members were arrested by the Gusu police who had been waiting for many days. In March 3 years ago, Tai-san was targeted by the drug trafficking organization. His mother was killed by potassium cyanide injection. The first transaction was 10 kilograms of drugs. Write down the dates of these cases. Through the special killing method of potassium cyanide, Su Ming can boldly judge, the murderer of this private cinema homicide is most likely a member of this drug trafficking organization. Then the question is, the victim who died in the private cinema was just a computer coder with simple interpersonal relationships. A very pure otaku. Why was he targeted by the members of the drug trafficking organization? Moreover, just 1 month after this case, the number of high-purity drugs in Gusu City immediately increased several times. Does this mean, this member of the drug trafficking organization in Gusu City has passed the internal assessment? Or gained trust? In this case, then the so-called assessment and trust, isn't it likely that, at this moment, without any hesitation, Su Ming immediately used this high-authority account to search for cities where high-purity heroin had been confiscated. First, Jinling City. 2 years ago, high-purity heroin appeared, and 8 months later, the number and weight of seized heroin began to increase. Flip forward to check. There is a special case named, Red Boy Strangling Suicide Case, which has not been closed yet, because it is still unclear whether it is homicide or suicide. Then, it is Mingzhou City, which is also not far away. Year ago, high-purity drugs appeared, and in just 2 months, a large amount of high-purity heroin emerged in the drug market, and almost at the same time as the high-purity drugs appeared, an unsolved case called Villa Electric Saw dismemberment case, and the murderer has not been found. Continue flipping. It is Linen City, which is famous for its beautiful Westlake scenery. High-purity drugs also appeared 2 years ago, but in less than 3 months, all the high-purity drugs on the market have disappeared in extremely strange ways. Carefully review the files within these 3 months. Su Ming has already discovered. There is a case called Westlake Drowning and Corpse Disposal Case, which is currently closed. The murderer fell down and committed suicide an hour before he was found, although the murderer was found and identified, but this case also took nearly 10 days to be solved through a tiny clue. But that's not all. Half an hour later, Su Ming breathed out a tired breath and leaned on the chair staring at the ceiling. His eyes were full of seriousness and coldness, and even more indescribable dignity and anger. Because, by reviewing criminal files from numerous cities, he has been able to determine one thing: members of this huge drug trafficking organization want to be recognized by other members and obtain more quotas of high-purity drugs. You must do a perfect murder. Certainly, it's not that it's truly perfect, but it's a murder that cannot be discovered by the police, at least for a certain period of time. This time is roughly a month. If the suspect is not discovered and arrested by the police within a month, the drug quota will be increased. The longer the police fail to catch him, the higher his quota will be. And this is the motive for murder. Apart from this, the scariest thing is, members of drug trafficking organizations who failed to hide their identities after committing crimes and were discovered by the police, without exception, they all committed suicide. There is no chance at all to continue exploring in depth. Quite literally, currently, every member of this drug trafficking organization has successfully escaped from a murder case. The criminal intelligence of the entire drug trafficking organization is so terrifying that it is unimaginable. This moment, just when Su Ming was a little solemn, deeply aware of the terrifying extremes of this huge drug trafficking organization, Su Chongqing pushed open the conference room door and waved to Su Ming. "Xiao Ming, let's go to the technical department together. They have helped us find several possible suspects, and the most problematic one is Qu Wenbiao. In recent years, all of Qu Wenbiao's close relatives have passed away due to illness, leaving only one son who is studying in the United States. And you know what? He is not only the principal, he has also served as a teacher in the psychological counseling room of Shud Middle School in the past few months." Chapter 62 The Perfect Suspect. Qu Wenbiao is the murderer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The news brought by Su Chongqing immediately made Su Ming feel a little surprised. He is also a psychologist. His only son is studying in the United States. You know, opioids are not regulated in the United States and are in a state of serious abuse. Almost everyone has a few bottles at home. Could it be assisting in the crime? However, out of consideration for the rigor and responsibility of the case, Su Ming did not make any judgment immediately. Instead, he hurriedly walked out of the meeting room and followed Su Chongqing to the Criminal Investigation Technology Department. While walking towards the Criminal Investigation Technology Department, Su Chongqing talked about the current findings. Through the screening of many school staff of Shud Middle School, 3 suspects who roughly meet the requirements have been found. Because most of the other school staff have not had contact with Huang Yan and Zhang Wan. So this screening is based on the knowledge of the 2 people and the sufficient opportunities and time to commit crimes. These 3 people are Shud Middle School's principal Qu Wenbiao, vice principal Zhang Heng, and their former class teacher Lu Yan. In the screening of the technical department, Qu Wenbiao's suspicion is much higher than the other 2. Speaking of this, the 2 also walked to the location of the Criminal Investigation Technology Department, and Su Chongqing waved his hand and signaled. "Hu Zi, don't watch the surveillance for now. Come on, tell Xiao Ming about the 3 suspects we just screened out." Then, Su Chongqing looked at the other 2 old police officers who had cooperated for many years next to him, and said seriously. "Old Chen, Aki. You 2 should put aside the work of the technical department for the time being. Go and keep an eye on Shogo's wife and daughter in plain clothes these days, and observe if there are any people with special whereabouts squatting nearby. I'm worried." As this case deepens, we will start investigating Qu Wenbiao, and the members of the drug trafficking organization will also take action. Then, Shogo's family and daughter are definitely one of their targets, and we must be on guard. After receiving this order, Old Chen and Aki nodded, and left the technical department without hesitation, and went to Shogo's address to squat for possible suspects. At the same time, Wang Hu, with an excited expression on his face, opened the sorted clues related to Qu Wenbiao and spoke. Brother Ming. We have just retrieved the identity database, medical records, the school's official website, personal party member information, and other channels to obtain information. Among the 3 suspects currently screened, the possibility of Zhang Heng and Lu Yan is much lower than that of Qu Wenbiao. Because no matter from which angle, Qu Wenbiao is more consistent with your and Brother Xing's inference. Well, at least 80% of it is consistent at present, 0.8% consistent. This probability made Su Ming raise his eyebrows, and he was even more surprised. After all, in the experience of many criminal investigation cases, if a suspect appears, it can be 80% consistent with the inferred results. Then it can be basically determined, this suspect is the murderer. This is because, no matter how accurate the many characteristics and clues inferred by the police are, they may be different from the actual situation, so it is normal for the situation of the real murderer to be slightly different from the inferred results. It can be 70 to 80% consistent, that is already very high, and you can boldly arrest him and interrogate the details of the case. Su Ming frowned slightly and nodded. Huzi. Tell me in detail, what is the difference between Qu Wenbiao and what we inferred? That without the slightest hesitation. Wang Hu clicked to turn to the next page, showing a yellowed color old photo. This is a high school graduation photo. A slight identification can reveal that Qu Wenbiao in his student days is standing in the middle of the back row and making a scissors hand gesture for a photo, and the background behind is the gate of his high school, with a few big words hanging on it, Xingtian Senior High School. This graduation photo was taken from Qu Wenbiao's party member file. Wang Hu pointed to the photo on the screen and continued to tell the story. About 35 years ago, when Xingtian village was the most prosperous, Qu Wenbiao's parents worked in that textile factory. At the same time, Qu Wenbiao was also there and spent his student days, so he must be very familiar with Xingtian village, and he grew up here since he was a child. Next is the second series of photos. Wang Hu continued to click on the notebook, cutting together a series of photos of various activities and interviews. In this long picture, all the protagonists are Qu Wenbiao, but he is wearing a thin mask, without showing his nose and mouth. At the same time, all the portraits in these photos are wearing long-sleeved shirts, and it is obvious that the temperature is not very high. Seeing this, Su Ming frowned and spoke slowly. Allergic rhinitis. Qu Wenbiao should have allergic rhinitis, and it is a very serious one. Otherwise, he would not wear this thin mask to prevent pollen in these activities and interviews. After all, wearing a mask is better than sneezing and making a fool of yourself in the middle of an interview. And judging from the clothes he wore, it was basically in spring, which is the time when pollen spreads the most. Brother Ming, it really has to be you. Wang Hu sighed skillfully, opened the next medical insurance expenditure picture, and continued. This is Qu Wenbiao's medical insurance expenditure. I went to Huaihai District People's Hospital a few days ago, and the doctor prescribed him antihistamines such as chlorpheniramine and clarithromycin. Based on the effect of the drugs, it can be judged that it is to relieve the symptoms of pollen allergy. So it may be because of this. Brother Ming, he didn't wear a mask when you and Brother Xing went to school. Of course, it may also be that he was too anxious and forgot to wear a mask. Then, Wang Hu turned to the last photo and pointed to the internal campus announcement. There is also this appointment and dismissal form. 2 months ago, the psychological counseling teacher of Shid Middle School was dismissed by Qu Wenbiao. The reason given was, he left his post without permission and was basically not on duty in the psychological counseling room. Students couldn't find him even if they wanted to. Then, 3 days after the dismissal, Qu Wenbiao suddenly decided to temporarily take over as the psychological counseling teacher, and replace himself after finding a suitable candidate. But in fact, I checked various materials, and Qu Wenbiao did not have a qualification certificate as a psychological counselor. The only place where he might have learned about psychology was when he was in college. Because he was a normal student, he learned a little bit. But it's been so long, he should have forgotten it. Although there are some small problems here, based on the current information, I think Qu Wenbiao is indeed the most suspicious. After listening to Wang Hu's words, Su Ming had already frowned deeply, and there was some unspeakable doubt in his heart. Could it be that the murderer was really Qu Wenbiao? But, why would a person who can use the blue whale game, an extremely covert means of mind control, to commit crimes, be so scared that he keeps calling to ask questions? And he calls Lin Tian, an experienced old detective. Isn't he worried about his identity being exposed? The most important thing is, analyzing from the cases of drug trafficking organization members that I just read, this huge drug trafficking organization is very strict in selecting personnel, and it should not choose someone with such poor psychological quality as Qu Wenbiao. Besides, Su Ming does not think that Qu Wenbiao, who has no foundation in psychology, can lead this blue whale game. No. It is absolutely impossible to be that simple. Chapter 63: A huge drug trafficking organization surfaces, and the murderer behind the dismemberment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although various information about Qu Wenbiao, they all closely match the portrait of the murderer that Su Ming deduced, but it just comes down to personal character. Taiwan Novel Networked, something went terribly wrong. How could a cautious and keen murderer call Lin Tian again and again? Doesn't this increase the chance of exposing yourself? Unless Qu Wenbiao wanted to defy logic and use this method to reversely whitewash himself. That Qu Wenbiao was too superfluous, because what the criminal police pays attention to when handling cases is actual evidence, not positive and negative logic like werewolf killing. Logic is only used to find the suspect and cannot be used as evidence to identify the suspect. So, is it possible that the murderer behind the scenes knew Qu Wenbiao's personal information very well, so he designed the clues left behind? Are they all based on Qu Wenbiao? The purpose was specifically to ask the police to shift their target to Qu Wenbiao, in order to escape pursuit. Moreover, this method of framing the crime is very consistent with the personality and character of the murderer behind the scenes: cautious, fierce, cunning. Just as Su Ming was thinking endlessly in his mind, outside the corridor of the technical department, there was the sound of heavy and steady footsteps. 3 seconds later, Lin Tian had already appeared at the door of the technology department. After seeing Su Ming and Su Chongqing, he walked in. So you are here. I went to the case handling conference room just now, but I didn't see you too, so I thought I might come here. How is it? How is the situation now? I just reported this matter to Director Shen. The superiors take it very seriously and have already started discussing it. How to uncover this huge drug trafficking organization. So the current task of our brigade is to detect this falling case as soon as possible, find out the murderer behind the scenes, and follow the clues to the drug trafficking organization as much as possible. These words, in an instant, all the police officers in the technical department became more and more nervous and dignified, because Lin Tian in coming here to say these words is enough to prove the importance and influence of this case. Now, because of Lin Tian's words, the technical department suddenly became silent. Su Chongqing rubbed his chin and thought for 2 seconds, then took Wang Hu's mouse and broke the silence. Master. We are currently extremely suspicious that Qu Wenbiao, the principal of Shid Middle School, is the murderer behind this falling case. Because according to the murderer's portrait analyzed by Xiao Ming, Qu Wenbiao is at least 80% similar. There are even some differences, and there is a certain degree of error tolerance. Having the potential to be the perfect suspect. Speaking of which, Su Chongqing looked at Su Ming beside him and asked seriously. By the way, Xiao Ming. After listening to Huzi's description just now, what do you think? Is it possible that Qu Wenbiao is the murderer? That it's obvious. After inferring from previous cases, Su Chongqing already had great faith in Su Ming's reasoning ability. Otherwise, in this situation, I would not specifically ask Su Ming what his thoughts and judgment were. Cleared the thoughts in my mind. Su Ming looked around at Lin Tian and Su Chongqing, and answered quite seriously. Lin Bureau, Brother Sheng. Although Qu Wenbiao fits the identity of the perfect suspect, but based on his character analysis, I think the murderer behind the scenes is most likely not him, or someone deliberately framed him. Because the murderer was extremely cautious in the way he committed the crime. This is really in contrast to Qu Wenbiao's repeated calls to the Forestry Bureau. And I have previously analyzed and browsed the cases in surrounding provinces and cities in recent years, and now I have obtained key clues about the drug trafficking organization. Based on the clues I got, I think Qu Wenbiao is most likely not worthy of joining this drug trafficking organization. Yes, it's not worthy. Huh? Not worthy of joining? Lin Tian asked in surprise, then stretched out his hand to indicate. Keep talking, Xiao Ming. Tell us roughly what you found in the file. Su Ming lowered his head slightly, tapped his right fingers on the back of his left hand and spoke. First, by judging the time when high-purity heroin was discovered in each province and city, and the time when the weight increased, I unexpectedly discovered. But in the first month or two before the weight increases, there is definitely a murder case that the local police failed to solve. At the same time, high-purity heroin also appeared in several provinces and cities, but it was all wiped out in a short period of time, and it never appeared again. Through file analysis, I found that there was a murder case before this, which was extremely difficult to detect. It took at least 4 to 5 days to solve it. From this I can boldly judge. All suspects who are invited to join the drug trafficking organization must create an unsolved murder in order to gain recognition and increase the number of drugs under their control. Or, the leader of this drug trafficking organization uses this method to control his subordinates, leaving them with no way out, and preventing our undercover police officers from joining the organization. At the same time, this also caused it. The members of this drug trafficking organization are absolutely loyal enough, and their criminal IQ is extremely high. Being able to escape unscathed after committing a murder is enough to prove how terrifying this group of people's vigilance and anti-detection ability are. And this may also be. It has been so many years, and we have only discovered this drug trafficking organization now, that the voice fell, the entire technical department fell into silence again, and everyone's eyes trembled and their faces were full of shock, just because the inference that Su Ming just said was really too terrifying. An entire organization, all of them have successfully escaped pursuit and are desperate criminals with big cases. Lin Tian's expression was also a little moved, but he immediately adjusted himself and smiled to ease the atmosphere. It seems. If this drug trafficking organization is compared to a dinner party, the invitation letter is just to visit the venue. If you want to sit down and eat, you must pay enough gift money, which is the name of the murderer, and escape. Then he exhaled a breath of turbid air. Lin Tian patted Su Ming's shoulder, and there seemed to be a storm gathering in his calm eyes. He made the decision. Bring Qu Wenbiao to the police station first. Although he is most likely not the murderer, but starting from him, maybe we can find the murderer, that while controlling the summons of Qu Wenbiao, in the old city of Huaihai district, in an old residential community called Happy Home, a decadent otaku with a tired face, messy hair, and a Shiba Inu in his hand, he was walking the dog while chewing the multigrain pancake in his hand, but his eyes glanced around from time to time. When he walked to the main entrance of the community with the Shiba Inu, he looked at the middle-aged man sitting in the ramen shop. Outside the community, who seemed to be slurping ramen, but actually didn't eat much, and a certain Dong brother was walking towards him, pushing a cart with a lot of express deliveries on it. He yawned, moved closer to the young man without showing any expression, and then sniffed hard. He found that there was no disgusting sweat smell, but instead a smell of plastic from a garment factory where clothes had just been unpacked. After squinting his eyes slightly, the decadent otaku gently pulled the dog chain in his hand, and urged with a sense of kidney deficiency. Let's go, Shiba Inu. It's time to go home. The Shiba Inu seemed to be very human, twisting its butt and walking towards the most remote building in the community. When the decadent otaku returned home and locked the door, his originally tired eyes immediately became sharp and solemn. He threw the dog chain aside, took out a mobile phone from the shoe cabinet and inserted a cracked disposable phone card. He dialed the number that he had already memorized. When the decadent otaku counted to 15 seconds in his heart, the phone was picked up on time at the other end. Without any hesitation or doubt about the identity of the other party, the decadent otaku spoke first. I just saw 2 police dogs, following the scent to the neighborhood of Shogo's wife and daughter. Shogo probably gave up everything. It's likely that he told the police everything about the doctor and the organization. What a spineless guy, he doesn't even care about his wife and children. What should we do now? Shogo, should I go find the doctor now and ask him to think about giving us away? Before he could finish, the mysterious man called K interrupted him with a relaxed tone, and even the crisp clash of red wine glasses could be heard. You don't need to come, poison. Find a chance to go back to your gusu. The doctor's assessment failed. I'll let the sculptor solve this matter. After all, the demon city is under his jurisdiction. Although he is a pure lunatic, it should be no problem to deal with a piece of trash who failed. After all, the case he worked on has been hanging there for almost 20 years. Chapter 64. Come, Principal Chu, put on the handcuffs yourself. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After confirming that Qu Wenbiao was the next breakthrough point, the Huaihai criminal investigation team acted very quickly, and the police car was speeding on the highway. The journey that originally took 20 minutes was shortened by nearly half by Su Changsheng. Arrived at the gate of Shid Middle School, Su Ming pushed open the door of the co-pilot and got out. He saw that there were many more interview cars from major media around him than in the morning, but the vehicles of the Huaihai District Education Bureau have already left. I guess I guessed it. This case is not as simple as I thought, so I didn't waste time waiting for the result. After all, prepare for the worst and go back to the Education Bureau to hold a meeting to discuss a solution as soon as possible, which may be more valuable, because of this case, under the exaggerated propaganda of those unscrupulous media. It has already had a considerable impact on the internet. When Su Ming and Su Changsheng walked into the campus in police uniforms, unexpected discovery, just in an open space not far from the school gate, Qu Wenbiao, wearing a thin mask, was surrounded by a large group of media reporters. Some held microphones, some held mobile phones, and some held recorders, etc., and were deliberately guiding and questioning Qu Wenbiao. Principal Chu, I heard that this was a deliberate murder case. Does it prove the loopholes and mistakes of Shid Middle School's military management for many years? Principal Chu, I haven't seen the family of the deceased come yet. Did your school choose to spend a lot of money to reconcile with the family of the deceased? Principal Chu, does this student fall from the building make you think about changing the school's philosophy? From grades first, to quality education and all-round development. Principal Chu, please take off your mask. Principal Chu. From this kind of induced interview, it can be seen, most of the people who are blocking Qu Wenbiao and forcing him to question are not official formal media. They are basically so-called second-rate newspapers, and various internet celebrities who are trying to get first-hand news and processes to gain traffic and lead the rhythm. But there is no way. It has been several hours since Zhang Wan fell from the building. If there is no response, who knows what nonsense these people will make up. Once the process of these people's compilation is widely recognized by netizens and the public, even if the police later produced a complete case report, it would be useless. In other words, most netizens only want to hear the results they want to hear, not the so-called truth. Su Changsheng glanced at Qu Wenbiao, who was surrounded by the media, and couldn't help but sneered and mocked. If I hadn't checked something in advance. Maybe you really thought Qu Wenbiao was a good principal. In order to protect the reputation of the school, you can only deal with this group of unscrupulous media in this way. But after getting the relevant information, I think accepting interviews from unscrupulous media now is like covering up the fact that I called Director Lin many times because of panic. At this moment, Su Ming and Su Changsheng have already approached the crowd. Qu Wenbiao's slightly hoarse voice can also be heard clearly. Dear reporters and media, I have told you countless times that the cause of the fall is still under investigation. I cannot give you any answers or ideas. As for whether to adjust school rules or atmosphere, or even management mode, please wait until the truth of this tragedy is found out. If you still don't believe it, I can call Director Lin of the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Brigade on the spot and let him tell you the progress of the case in person. Compared to me, Director Lin's answer, I believe you should also. Before Qu Wenbiao finished speaking, standing at the back of the encirclement, Su Changsheng, who was not noticed by anyone at all, interrupted directly. Principal Qu. No need to call Director Lin. The case is at a critical stage, and Director Lin has no time to answer your call, so let us come to pick you up to the Criminal Investigation Brigade. Together, sort out the subsequent cases and find out the real cause of the fall. These words suddenly sounded. The many media who surrounded Qu Wenbiao turned their heads and looked behind, seeing Su Changsheng in police uniform and with a cold expression. They all squeezed around and made way. Qu Wenbiao, who was half holding up his phone and seemed to be about to call Lin Tian, paused, then he looked at Su Changsheng and Su Ming and answered with a strange and reluctant look. Did Director Lin ask me to go to the Criminal Investigation Brigade? Okay, then I'll solve the problem here and go with you to see the latest progress of the case. When Su Changsheng stated his purpose, Su Ming's eyes always stayed on Qu Wenbiao's face, carefully observing his micro-expressions. Although he was wearing a mask on his face, Su Ming could see some nervousness and panic from Qu Wenbiao's eyes, as well as the tone and speed of his response. It was obvious, even if Qu Wenbiao was not the murderer of the falling case, he was definitely related to the case. When I first came to Shid Middle School, Qu Wenbiao accompanied the leaders of the Education Bureau throughout the whole process and arranged for Vice Principal Zhang Heng to cooperate with Su Ming and others in investigating the case, which allowed Qu Wenbiao to hide until now. Otherwise, it is estimated that at the beginning, just a few simple questions would have been enough to catch him out. Because, judging from the current state, Qu Wenbiao's psychological quality is indeed very poor. Su Changsheng's simple 2 sentences have made him nervous and a little impatient. In order to avoid wasting too much time, Su Changsheng walked through the path made by the unscrupulous reporters, stood beside Qu Wenbiao, and said coldly with an expressionless face. Let's all go. It won't be long before our police will announce the specific investigation results. During this period, don't interfere with our investigation. I think everyone present. You probably don't want to have tea in the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Brigade because of obstructing public affairs, and all your privacy will be turned upside down by us, right? As soon as these words came out, there is no need to say anything more. Those unscrupulous fake reporters who were holding various recording devices around them looked at each other for a few times. They dispersed tacitly and didn't dare to say a word more. After all, in the minds of most dragon people, criminal police are definitely a profession that cannot be provoked. Wait until these unscrupulous fake reporters disperse. Su Changsheng hugged Qu Wenbiao's shoulders very intimately, with a gentle smile on his face, as if Lin Tian had sent him to invite him. In fact, he was trying to control Qu Wenbiao as much as possible to avoid any other accidents. That's it. The two seemed to be very close to the police car, and after Qu Wenbiao sat in the back seat, the smile on Su Changsheng's face suddenly faded, and he opened the car door seriously and walked to the driver's seat, and casually threw the handcuffs to the empty seat in the back row. He looked up at the rearview mirror in the car, stared at Qu Wenbiao and said coldly, "Come on, Principal Qu. You are a highly educated scholar, and even more a member of the party. I don't want to take coercive measures. So put on the handcuffs yourself. I have given you enough face in front of the media just now. I hope you don't make it difficult for me now." These words, Qu Wenbiao was stunned for a moment, and when he saw the handcuffs next to the seat, he opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but before he could say anything, Su Changsheng held the steering wheel with one hand, turned sideways and stared at Qu Wenbiao with cold eyes, and pursed his lips at the handcuffs. Silence for a few seconds. Qu Wenbiao lowered his head sadly and picked up the silver handcuffs next to the seat. With a click, he handcuffed it to his wrist. Staring at the scenery outside the window with gray eyes. Chapter 65, I was the one who killed her. The interrogation was in a weird atmosphere. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 15 minutes later, the police car has taken Qu Wenbiao back to the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Brigade. Despite his higher social status, Qu Wenbiao was also immediately placed in the interrogation room. There are no preferential treatment or privileges at all, because, when this special campus falling case was not only related to minors, but also implicated a huge drug trafficking organization. The importance of this case has far exceeded everyone's imagination, the superiors even issued a death order. No matter who will be involved in the end, they will be investigated directly to death, and the rotten roots must be thoroughly dug out. Now, Su Ming was sitting in the case conference room, staring up at the ceiling, squinting his eyes slightly with unspeakable doubts, when Qu Wenbiao was arrested just now, except for the obvious panic and fear in him at the beginning, got to the back. It seemed that only acceptance and silence were left. Even when Su Changxing handed him the handcuffs, he didn't even think about trying not to wear them. Why is that? Judging by the criminal methods of mind control, Qu Wenbiao, who has a somewhat cowardly personality, should not be able to commit such a case. Moreover, in all his resumes and reports, there is no record that Qu Wenbiao specializes in psychology. In this case, it is even less likely to be the mastermind behind the Blue Whale game case. Drug trafficking organizations must also look down on such a person, not a murderer. The most likely possibility is that Qu Wenbiao was involved in the case, or was coerced in some way to help the murderer behind the scenes carry out the case, because in this case, Qu Wenbiao was completely unaware. All the current clues inferred were specially created by the mastermind behind the scenes, and the possibility of pointing to Qu Wenbiao was almost non-existent. After all, if he was really framed, no matter how cowardly Qu Wenbiao was, he would not remain silent like this. As for being coerced, even if Qu Wenbiao was caught by the murderer, wouldn't it be better to help conceal it as much as possible? Why was he in the police car earlier and when he was taken all the way to the interrogation room? Still remain silent without saying a word. This is like a skinny dog. Are you worried that after you tell everything, your family and relatives will be killed by a certain person or organization? That's impossible. When I checked Qu Wenbiao's personal information earlier, Su Ming had deliberately paid attention to his family files. What is certain at present is, as early as 3 years ago, Qu Wenbiao's wife died of illness, and his only son was sent to study abroad. As for his parents, he used to be an employee of Tian textile factory. After the factory was reformed and banned, Qu Wenbiao's parents worked outside for a few more years. Later, because they were older, they did not choose to live with Qu Wenbiao, but returned to the factory. Tian village, 5 years ago, these two old people passed away earlier, so it stands to reason, there was no possibility that Qu Wenbiao's family was being coerced, but he remained strangely silent. From the moment the handcuffs are put on until the moment you enter the interrogation room, not even a single word of defense was uttered. What is this doing? Waiting for a lawyer? Or give up on yourself? Or, is Qu Wenbiao preparing to take over this case on behalf of someone, so he remains silent? Think of this, as if Su Ming suddenly caught some clue, he quickly took out the cell phone in his pocket and dialed Wang Hu's number. As the two waiting busy signals passed, the phone was picked up. Without waiting for Wang Hu to ask anything, Su Ming took the lead and spoke without any doubt. Tiger. Help me check Qu Wenbiao's major bank cards to see if there are any records of large and multiple transfer transactions in the past 6 months. If you can. Help me check as much as possible to see if he has a bank card overseas. If you find something, send me a text message immediately. Speaking of which, Su Ming saw that Su Changxing had already opened the door and pointed to him in the direction of the interrogation room. Next to him stood Lin Tian, who had basically stopped handling frontline cases. It's obvious, this is when Su Changxing finished reporting the situation to Lin Tian and was about to start interrogating Qu Wenbiao, and Lin Tian, who is extremely experienced, will also participate in this interrogation, not only because of Qu Wenbiao's identity, but also because of the need to examine all clues as much as possible to further understand the huge drug trafficking organization. Okay, that's it. Without any hesitation, Su Ming hung up the phone after finishing speaking, then he quickly walked to Su Changxing and Lin Tian with his notebook and a series of materials. It seemed that he had not been interrogated with Lin Tian for a long time. Su Changxing looked a little excited. Master. I didn't expect that you would even come to interrogate me, but it just so happens that I can show Xiaoming the strength of our Huaihai Brigade's ace veteran detective. Don't talk nonsense here. Lin Tian slightly glanced at Su Changxing with some disgust, and then continued. You will still be the main ones later and you will conduct the interrogation. I will assume the role of observer and supplementary interrogation. To be honest, this case is so big that I dare not relax for fear of missing anything that may be related to the drug trafficking organization. Arrived at the interrogation room, other police officers had already moved a chair in advance. When Su Ming put away his notebook and other things, he walked to the corner to turn on the camera. Lin Tian sighed, shook his head and looked at Qu Wenbiao, who had taken off his mask opposite, and said slowly. Principal Qu. You are also an intellectual, with a special position, and you are a few years older than me, with rich life experience. In this situation, even if you have not seen it yourself, you must have heard a lot of people talk about it. So don't hold any fluke mentality, and confess everything you should confess when the time comes. I will do my best to give you a chance and give you the possibility of a lighter sentence. Okay, let's start. After saying this, Su Ming also sat on the chair, and Su Changxing took the lead in asking questions. Let's skip the personal information. Principal Qu, do you know the information of the deceased in the falling case in your school? Qu Wenbiao lowered his head, as if he was very tired, and answered weakly. I know. Su Changxing nodded, then tapped the table with his fingers and continued. Since Principal Qu already knows, let's not waste any more time and get straight to the point. Why did you resign 2 months ago? Before Su Changxing finished speaking, Qu Wenbiao seemed not to have heard the previous question and continued to lower his head. I know. I know the specific information of classmate Zhang Wan, and I know that her parents divorced a long time ago and she lived with her grandmother, which made her lonely and unsociable. A month ago, her grandmother passed away, leaving her without any support in the end, making her the best candidate for psychological control. I know. Officer Su, you must be asking me how I know about psychological control. Because. Speaking of this, Qu Wenbiao slowly raised his head, revealing eyes that were calm without a trace of ripples, and said without any emotion. Because, I was the one who killed her. Chapter 66, Huge Overseas Transfers. Qu Wenbiao collapses from talking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I killed her. Qu Wenbiao was completely emotionless, speaking the most ordinary words as if he had accepted his fate. The 3 people in the interrogation room all frowned at the same time, because, Taiwan Novel Network, even if Wang Hu, a rookie, interrogated Qu Wenbiao, he would easily be able to tell that he was lying, but Qu Wenbiao could say, psychological control and Zhang Wan's recent situation, things that the school principal would never know. After all, the school has so many students and many complicated affairs. How can the principal have so much time to pay attention to the death of a student's loved one? So now it is obvious that, first of all, the person was definitely not killed by Qu Wenbiao. At least this kind of cowardly character is definitely not the kind of meticulous murderer who can design the blue whale game crime, but he definitely knew a lot of details in the case, and he might even have been directly involved. Secondly, Qu Wenbiao did not intend to give out his accomplices in the case, and he obviously planned to take on the case alone, because just based on his high-level knowledge as a high school principal, he was destined not to be the kind of legal illiterate who thought nothing happened after killing someone. So, if Qu Wenbiao was really coerced or used, he should have immediately told the process of the case, hoping to gain merit and seek a lighter sentence. Instead of being like this now, he actually said with a dead heart, that the person was murdered. He didn't even do the simplest rebuttal or concealment, which was undoubtedly a way to take the blame, and it was the kind of, no matter what he used to threaten or persuade, he would never give out the real murderer. This was completely different from the skinny dog who gave up everything not long ago. At this moment, after saying that he was the murderer, Qu Wenbiao once again lowered his head in silence. Su Changxing frowned, tapped the table with his right index finger, and said in a serious and cold voice. Principal Qu. I think you should realize the seriousness of this case. This is a juvenile murder case. Not a simple petty theft. This is not something you can take on if you want to, and the real murderer is not. You can hide alone. We have a lot of clues at present. Even if you are so uncooperative, Principal Qu, we are bound to find the murderer in the end. Are you sure you want to give up the opportunity for a lighter punishment for the sake of? Are you sure you want to give up the opportunity for a lighter punishment for a result that cannot be changed at all? Principal Qu, explain the specific process of the case. This is the most correct choice. After saying the official persuasion, Qu Wenbiao still did not change at all, lowered his head in silence, and was even unwilling to answer. This uncooperative attitude, it made Su Chongqing feel a little impatient and angry. If it was changed to the previous era when the interrogation requirements were not so strict, even though Qu Wenbiao is a middle school principal and a member of the party, he still needs to undergo a memory recovery procedure. Seeing that Su Chongqing was obviously annoyed by Qu Wenbiao's attitude, Lin Tian, who was sitting next to him, gently patted his shoulder and said seriously, like a stabilizing force. Principal Qu. To be honest, we have had the honor of meeting several times before, so seeing you in front of me in this state today, I feel a little uncomfortable. Since you are also in the interrogation room, I am afraid you will not be free for a long time in the future. I will tell you bluntly. This fall from the building in your Middle School is not just a student falling from the building. According to the clues we have dug up, it is related to a huge drug trafficking organization that has been entrenched in our country for a long time. The person you are protecting now is also a member of this drug trafficking organization. As a member of the party, Principal Qu, you cannot be unaware that our country has always maintained a true zero-tolerance attitude towards drugs. At this point, Lin Tian softened his tone and spoke softly like an old friend reminiscing about the past. Principal Qu. Tell me everything that happened, I can promise you now. Not only will you be given a chance to receive a lighter sentence, but also the real murderer, a chance to surrender and receive a lighter sentence. You can't hide it, surrendering and confessing are the correct ways to reduce your sentence. If you can tell us the relevant personnel and main locations of the drug trafficking organization, you can make meritorious service and maybe you can get out in a few years. It's obvious, Lin Tian, a truly experienced old criminal policeman, is very clear about Qu Wenbiao's attitude just now. It is almost impossible to pry out the process and details of this case from him in a tough way, only by adopting a gentle attitude, and promising to reduce the sentence by surrendering, the only valuable promise in the case. Can Qu Wenbiao let go and tell the specific details of the case? Just like now, after hearing that there is still the possibility of making meritorious service, Qu Wenbiao immediately raised his head slowly, with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But it seems that I don't remember something. It only lasted less than 3 seconds, the hope in Qu Wenbiao's eyes dissipated again, and he lowered his head again with gloomy eyes and said hoarsely and calmly. I am the murderer. Because Zhang Wan's grades are so poor, continuing to stay in school will definitely lower the enrollment rate and average score of this class. But the graduation exam is approaching, and what happened to Zhang Wan's family? Even if I ask her to drop out of school, she will definitely not be willing. So I thought of a way to use the blue whale game to commit mind control crimes. In order to do this, I even quit my job as a psychological counselor at school. He didn't wait for Qu Wenbiao to finish. Su Ming directly interrupted his words, sighed and shook his head helplessly. Hello, Principal Qu. Why are you so upset? Zhang Wan's grandma passed away just a month ago. What does this have to do with you firing the school's psychological counselor 2 months ago? It seems to me. It must be that the murderer behind the scenes specifically asked you to find a suitable target in order to complete the assessment of the drug trafficking organization, right? After searching for a month, I still couldn't find anyone suitable, so you remembered. Huang Yan, who was lame due to a car accident last year and has not continued to go to school, is right. In the end, Huang Yan ignored you. As the assessment became more and more urgent, the more fragile Zhang Wan happened to appear. In this case. Not finished yet. Dip. Su Ming's cell phone placed on the table suddenly sounded a notification that a new message had been received. There was no hesitation. Su Ming quickly clicked on the message and his eyes suddenly became sharp when he saw the latest clue sent by Wang Hu. Immediately afterwards, looking at Qu Wenbiao who was bowing his head and remaining silent, he gently rubbed his fingers and said calmly. Principal Qu. I think these things can be put aside for now. Please tell me first. About 3 months ago. In less than 3 days, you transferred a total of 8 million to an overseas account through major banks and other channels. Even in the second week after the transfer, you let the agent list your house for urgent sale. At a price that is fully 15% lower than the market price, the buyer completed the property transaction with full payment in cash. As for the house payment totaling 6 million, as soon as you got it and before you warmed it up, you transferred all 6 million to that overseas account. But in less than an hour, the 6 million was transferred back and returned to your card. The combined amount of several transfers exceeded 13 million, and the transfers stopped exactly 2 months ago. Yes, Principal Qu. Can you tell me, what is the relationship between the owner of the overseas account and you? Chapter 67 Majoring in Applied Psychology. Identify the hidden murderer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Ming's words, Qu Wenbiao, who had lowered his head in silence, raised his head in an instant, his eyes trembling slightly, as if it was difficult to remain calm. He opened his mouth for a long time, then forcefully spoke in a hoarse voice with a trembling voice. I don't know what you're talking about. What transfer? I didn't transfer money to anyone at all. Except that I am the murderer in this case, I don't know anything else. It can be seen, even though he was one of the few college students in the last century, Qu Wenbiao, who was weak and not clever, faced this situation, but he is just like other criminals, he could only forcefully insist that he didn't know, and maintain his pointless rhetoric. But this case is extremely serious. It's not like Qu Wenbiao can put it down temporarily just by saying a few words. Lin Tian was sitting next to him. After hearing what Su Ming just said, he turned around and asked, without expecting Qu Wenbiao to answer, Xiao Ming, are your sources of information accurate? During this period, did Qu Wenbiao make large transfers? Su Ming nodded, handed the phone on the table to Lin Tian, and answered affirmatively. Yes, Forest Bureau. Before I came to the interrogation room, I roughly deduced that Principal Qu probably planned to take the blame on his own. So, I think the murderer behind the scenes is likely to have been in contact with Principal Qu for a long time. The relationship should not even be unfamiliar. There is no possibility of being coerced. Then by analyzing the reasons and purposes of the vast majority of people participating in drug trafficking. Although the morbid psychology of enjoying excitement cannot be ruled out, I think money is still one of the most likely reasons. And as the principal of a private school, even if Principal Qu is not a shareholder of the school, his financial strength will definitely not be much worse. Since Principal Qu has an unusual relationship with the murderer behind the scenes, and may even help him with this kind of murder, I have concluded. Before joining a drug trafficking organization, I would definitely contact Principal Versio for help. I had no choice but to join a drug trafficking organization. Then directly querying the money transfer records is the best option to verify my inference. As for the final result, Forest Bureau, just like the text message displayed on the mobile phone, does have a huge amount of transfer records. After listening to Su Ming's reasoning, Lin Tian nodded in agreement and satisfaction, but was not too shocked. As an experienced criminal police officer, Lin Tian thought he could make these inferences. He looked at the many transfer records on his phone and said slowly, Sheng. How is Principal Qu's family relationship? Do you have any children studying or working abroad? The old detective was of course keen enough, through Su Ming's previous words, the transfer records on his cell phone, and Qu Wenbiao's attitude and performance. I immediately judged, Qu Wenbiao most likely has a child who is studying or working in other countries. Only in this case can we explain why Qu Wenbiao forced himself to take the blame, without any hesitation. Su Changsheng nodded quickly and replied, Yes. Master, yes. Principal Qu has a son studying abroad in the United States. His name is Qu Pengfei, but there has been no in-depth investigation yet. Because when this case started, we never imagined that it would be so involved. Lin Tian nodded gently, looking carefully at Qu Wenbiao's expression. He found that he was obviously restless, but he couldn't stand out too much. He could only keep clenching and unclenching his fists, keeping his feet and knees tightly together. These actions are enough to prove that Qu Wenbiao is currently in a state of extreme tension, from the previous calm and gloomy waiting for death to the current anxiety and tension. This huge change in psychological emotions made Lin Tian squint his eyes thoughtfully. There is no taboo on Qu Wenbiao at all. He sorted out the thoughts in his mind and used his own experience to piece together the clues. Sheng. First check the internal database and get the general information about Qu Pengfei. If nothing serious happens, the murderer behind this case is probably Qu Pengfei, the only son of Principal Qu. Judging from the large amount of overseas transfers and the fact that Principal Qu is willing to take the blame, only his own son can do it. Certainly. As a father, I can roughly deduce the reason why the 6 million gain from selling the house was transferred out and then transferred back. Speaking of which, Lin Tian paused for 2 seconds and took out his pocket as if he wanted to light a cigarette, but suddenly he remembered that he was in an interrogation room. He had no choice but to put his right index finger, which had been turned dark yellow by incense smoke, between his nose and smell the tobacco, and continued. Principal Qu. If I guess correctly, your son should have been to the Las Vegas casino in the United States 3 months ago, right? I've probably lost a lot of money, and even owe a lot of debt. Otherwise, I really can't think of anything that can cost so much. Transferring 8 million is not enough, and it will make you anxious to sell the house. When you transferred the 6 million for selling the house, you must have scolded your son and told him not to gamble again. As a result, your son also has a bad temper. He directly returned the money to you and chose to join the drug trafficking organization. I originally hoped to use the huge profits of the drug trafficking organization to pay off the money I owed, but I didn't expect. Once I chose to join, I fell into the abyss. At this moment, Qu Wenbiao's face became more and more ugly, his lips were pale and trembling, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This was caused by the huge inner pressure and excessive panic, but he still showed a forced smile. Director Lin, you may have misunderstood. I really don't know what you are talking about. And Xiaopeng has been abroad and has not come back. How could he commit such a thing in China? Lin Tian ignored the forced explanation and leaned comfortably on the chair, tapping the table. Xiaoming. You should have other clues to further prove this matter, right? Please help add, so that Principal Qu will stop struggling and cooperate with us. Hearing Lin Tian's words, Su Ming immediately recalled, sorted out all the previous clues, and tapped the table with his fingers. First. Through the blood test of the deceased, it was found that there were opioids and drug residues in it. The source of the drugs has been found, but there is no specific clue about the opioids now. Because according to the careful screening of our Criminal Investigation Technology Department, it was found that in the past 2 months. We have very strict control over opioids in Shanghai. Prescribing and taking medicines require online registration and uploading, and strive to track every one. So the possibility that those opioids came from the major hospitals in Shanghai is actually very low. Whether it came from outside the province or from pharmaceutical engineering, that is unknown. But now there is a preliminary suspect, and it can be roughly judged that those opioids should be brought back from the United States by Qu Pengfei. Compared to our country, opioids in the United States are in a state of abuse, and it is not difficult to take hundreds or thousands of pills at random. But with so many drugs, customs will definitely not allow it to pass, and in order to reduce their own suspicion. Qu Pengfei is likely to fly from the United States to Myanmar or Cambodia and then return to China by smuggling. For a drug trafficking organization, it is easy to bring people across such a border. And since he brought opioids back to China, it proves that Qu Pengfei had chosen the means of committing the crime as early as that time. So Principal Qu, you dismissed the psychologist 2 months ago, and even replaced him with yourself, so as to facilitate the search for prey. There is also a particularly important point. Speaking of this, Su Ming looked at Qu Wenbiao's trembling eyes and continued sharply. That's what Shogo heard during the call. As a school principal for many years, I don't think Principal Qu will not remember the time for eye exercises twice a day. Only your son, Qu Pengfei, who came back from the United States, will subconsciously not consider eye exercises because he has been abroad for a long time. After all, there is no so-called eye exercises in the United States, am I right, Principal Qu? At this moment, Qu Wenbiao was in panic and stagnation, and he kept opening his mouth slightly but couldn't say a word. For so many years in his life, even the day when his wife was pregnant and about to give birth, he didn't panic so much. At this moment, Su Changsheng, who had been searching in the database, suddenly pounded the table and said excitedly, "Found it! Qu Pengfei's major in college is Applied Psychology. Chapter 68 Choice. Apart from death, there is no other choice." You are listening at novelfull.audio. This moment, after it was determined that Qu Pengfei's major was applied psychology, many previous inferences came into being. Su Ming looked at Qu Wenbiao, who was facing him with a pale face and dull eyes, and said without any hesitation, "The most important thing seems to be that he has already matched up with the criminal suspect we described earlier. After all, remember the domain name of this website, Taiwan Novel Network. Although this criminal method of mind control seems very simple, you only need to send an email to induce the victim to commit suicide. But in fact, the threshold is not low. At least those step-by-step tasks require professionals to design them reasonably. By the way, Brother Sheng. Look, when he was studying in the United States, did Qu Pengfei participate in any internship-like activities in a mental hospital or psychological consultation room? That it's obvious, this question was what Su Ming wanted to confirm in the last email Huang Yan received. Why is it mentioned? The pigs in the mental hospital all know how to follow the rules better than she does. Are you out of anger? Or do you have something else to hide? Su Changsheng also understood the meaning of Su Ming's question and immediately continued to search. Although he does not specialize in criminal investigation technology, he is an experienced criminal police officer. The ability to obtain useful clues through various social media and official website news of suspects is naturally outstanding. Just under 2 minutes, Su Changsheng suddenly slammed the table again, looked at Su Ming and Lin Tian seriously, and said quickly, "Master, Xiao Ming. Do you know what I just discovered by browsing Qu Pengfei's overseas social software?" Su Changsheng did not deliberately act mysterious. He turned his notebook to Su Ming and Lin Tian and continued to talk. 3 months ago, Qu Pengfei posted a link to a paper in a high-end academic journal on an American social media platform. The first author of the paper is himself. The title of this paper is, "On the Implementation Techniques of Subliminal Psychological Control Using Drug-Assisted Cooperation." Then, prior to this, based on the content and information of his personal tweets, Qu Pengfei also had long-term volunteer experience in a public welfare mental sanatorium in the United States. At the same time, I found the promotional account of the mental sanatorium through all the accounts that Qu Pengfei followed. Discover. Since Qu Pengfei became a volunteer, the number of patients reported by that nursing home every month has decreased slightly. Although they are placed in a nursing home, it shows that those patients are not mentally healthy, and it is normal for them to die in various accidents. But if I take a bold guess, it is very likely that Qu Pengfei was in that sanatorium, trying to verify that kind of consciousness control technique, with the ultimate goal of making the victim commit suicide. That's why the number of patients in that nursing home has been declining for several months in a row. As for why the nursing home didn't find it, I think this kind of public welfare mental sanatorium most likely doesn't care about the life or death of its patients. As long as it's not an obvious murder, it will turn a blind eye. So after the experimental results are finally obtained, the paper can be published in foreign academic journals. Certainly in the paper, that would certainly conceal the process of this matter. The most important thing is, the closest tweet to now is a photo of Qu Pengfei in a Las Vegas casino. In the photo, there are many chips placed in front of him, so the stakes must be quite high. After he lost all his money, he probably took out a loan shark and was unable to repay it, so he joined a drug trafficking organization. Speaking of which, Su Changsheng squinted his eyes, looked at Qu Wenbiao opposite, and gave a hint. Since Qu Pengfei had successful experience in the past, after Qu Pengfei smuggled into the country and returned to the Magic City, he planned to initially select targets with the cooperation of Principal Qu. Use your most proficient consciousness control criminal techniques to complete the assessment goals of that huge drug trafficking organization. In that case, only by increasing drug quotas can we make more profits. Really, Principal Qu, that it can be seen, verify it through what Qu Pengfei showed on social software and existing clues. At present, many of the prerequisite requirements for this falling case have been met. At the same time, Qu Wenbiao's current status and actions have the best explanation. In order to save his son as much as possible, Qu Wenbiao chose to take the case on his own, it can be said. All the clues obtained now point to Qu Pengfei, but in the face of Su Changqing's cold inquiry, Qu Wenbiao's attitude remained unchanged. Although his face was pale and his eyes were dim, he still cocked his neck and answered hoarsely. No. It's not. I really don't know what you are talking about. Xiaopeng has never returned to China. This case. I did it all by myself. In this case, Qu Wenbiao, who was still talking harshly, made Su Ming and the three of them feel helpless, but I wasn't too angry or surprised. After all, most of Qu Wenbiao's family members died, leaving only one son, plus the weight of the word father, so although he is weak and timid, he is more determined than ever at this moment. Looking at Qu Wenbiao who was trembling slightly, Lin Tian sighed helplessly, shook his head and said regretfully. Principal Qu. There is really no need to hide it now. We have found the real murderer, and all the clues point to him. If you take the blame like this, not only will it not change the final result, but it will increase your punishment. Besides, instead of being here, afraid of taking the blame, you shouldn't have come to this step. Even if your son joins a drug trafficking organization out of anger, as the principal, you should understand the seriousness of the matter and stop it or call the police as soon as possible. In the end, you collaborated with him to commit crimes and kill people. I have to say something harsh. This moment, Lin Tian stared at Qu Wenbiao extremely seriously, pointed at the table and continued. After being a principal for so many years, in the end he assisted in committing crimes and pointed the tip of the knife into the school. You are sorry for all the teachers and students of Shud Middle School, and even more sorry for Zhang Wan who died, and Huang Yan who is currently addicted to drugs. You had better choices. He seemed to be stimulated by these words. Qu Wenbiao, who was still silent at first, suddenly interrupted Lin Tian's subsequent words very emotionally. He made fists with both hands and punched the table of the interrogation chair twice, struggling with excitement and roaring in regret and pain. Choose. Where is the choice? When Xiaopeng joined that drug trafficking organization out of anger, all options were gone. Do you think I didn't let Xiaopeng quit? Do you think I didn't think of other ways? But Bureau Lin, do you know what kind of desperados the members of this drug trafficking organization are? Did you know that these people have even built a special dark network to share their murderous experience and skills? But do you know that the Modi University corpse dismemberment case, the red shirt boy suicide by strangulation, the Villa chainsaw corpse dismemberment case, etc., which are still horrifying to this day, were all actually done by members of this organization? Choice. You know. Once you join this organization, there is no way to quit except death. Chapter 69, the news that Lin Tian has been waiting for 20 years, and the clues related to T. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Under the stimulation of Lin Tian's words, the string that Qu Wenbiao had always been tense in his heart suddenly broke, and his emotions at the moment seemed very excited. Or, this is a manifestation of alternative anger, angry at his son's angry choice, angry at himself for extending the butcher knife to the students of his school, angry at the coercion of the huge drug dealer organization, angry. Even if he tried so hard, he couldn't help Qu Pengfei take down this case. But compared to Qu Wenbiao's anger, the three people sitting opposite him were subconsciously stunned. Among them, Lin Tian, the leader, couldn't stop shaking his hands, his eyes were full of shock and hope, and there was a hint of panic, yes, panic, fear. Just now, it was just Qu Wenbiao's emotional breakdown, or the result of his own hallucination, because, after so many years, Lin Tian actually didn't have the idea and expectation in his heart. to solve the 5.13 Demon City University dismemberment case in his lifetime, even not sure whether the murderer of the case is still alive, basically. It is with his inner obsession and unwillingness that he has been paying attention to and tracking this case and is unwilling to give up, after all. This is the first case that Lin Tian, who was still in the trainee period, personally participated in the analysis, but he tried all means and failed to find the murderer in the end. Because of this, earlier, after hearing Su Chongqing mention that Su Ming found a new clue from the file nearly 20 years ago, Lin Tian locked himself in the office, lit a cigarette and silently read the file of the 5.13 Demon City University dismemberment case. This is what he wanted to analyze by himself. What clues were missed, and regret whether he could have caught the murderer if he had been more serious and careful. But now, Qu Wenbiao said, the dark web created by this huge drug trafficking organization actually recorded the experience and skills sharing of this 5.13 dismemberment case. Doesn't this mean, the murderer of the dismemberment case is also hiding in this huge drug trafficking organization? And there is a high probability that he is still alive. If this drug trafficking organization can be dug out, then this long-hidden murderer will definitely have nowhere to escape. At this moment, under the influence of multiple complex emotions, even though Lin Tian is an experienced old criminal policeman, it is difficult for him to remain calm. Looking at Qu Wenbiao, who gradually calmed down after venting his anger, his voice trembled slightly. Principal Qu. Did you just say? The members of this drug trafficking organization have committed many murders and are truly desperate criminals. Among those members, there are at least the murderers of the 3 murders of Magic City University dismemberment case, Red Boy strangling suicide case, and Villa Electric Saw dismemberment case. Obviously, although the current emotions are complicated and difficult to calm down, Lin Tian still maintains the necessary qualities and vigilance. He did not focus on the dismemberment case directly, but mixed it with other cases to seek the truth. This can prevent Qu Wenbiao from noticing something unusual, or using it to threaten him. Qu Wenbiao's collapsed mood calmed down a little, but he did not hear the strangeness in Lin Tian's words, raised his dark eyes, and answered with a hoarse and sad voice. Yes, Director Lin. I really have no choice. The people in this drug trafficking organization are all executioners who kill without blinking an eye. And once you join, you can only quit by dying. As for calling the police. Oh, what's the use of calling the police? The cases committed by these people have not been solved by your police so far. Is calling the police useful? Maybe calling the police will not save us, but will make us die faster and more miserably. Director Lin, do you understand? It's not that I don't want to call the police or don't want Xiaopeng to quit. But when I heard about this website from Xiaopeng and learned about the origins of other members of the organization. Even if I didn't see the details of the cases and the killing techniques with my own eyes, I knew that there was no choice at all. It's obvious, in Qu Wenbiao's heart, the deterrence and pressure brought by the police and the law are simply not comparable to those of other members of this huge drug trafficking organization. After all, the police must abide by the law, but in the eyes of those desperate criminals, the word law does not exist at all, not to mention that in Qu Wenbiao's opinion, calling the police is useless. Because the cases committed by the members of these drug trafficking organizations have not been solved so far, let alone arrested and brought to justice, helping his son pass the test has become the only way in his eyes. After getting Qu Wenbiao's affirmative answer, Lin Tian was silent for a few seconds, suppressing the extremely complicated emotions in his heart, temporarily put aside the dismemberment case of Magic City University, and focus on the current case that is about to be solved, and continue. Principal Qu. I tell you very seriously. Now don't continue to hide clues and information, let alone think you can handle this case. Because our team has just carefully checked the criminal files of surrounding provinces and cities and found something that you may not want to accept. That's any member who fails the examination of this drug trafficking organization will be eliminated in advance by various means. Or so. Once important information about the case is exposed and there is a possibility of being detected by the police, they are no longer companions of the members of this organization, but become hidden dangers that must be dealt with. After all, only dead people will not expose the organization's internal information. So, if you want to save your son, tell us where he is immediately. Now, we have to compete with those desperados for time. Hearing what Lin Tian said, Qu Wenbiao was stunned for a moment, then showed a forced smile and shook his head. Forest Bureau. Don't lie to me with this simple interrogation method. During this period, I also investigated a lot of legal and related cases. I know very well. Xiaopeng's behavior was too bad. The deceased was still an underage student. In addition, the amount of drugs sold had already reached the upper limit of the sentence. Even if there are circumstances of surrender or meritorious service, there is no possibility of probation. This is the law of our country. So. Speaking of which, Qu Wenbiao looked up at the ceiling, a smile uglier than crying appeared on his face. He closed his eyes and said hoarsely. Instead of him being caught and left to die. I prefer to believe. Those members of the organization who have been able to prevent you from catching him so far may help him escape and hide because of the sophistication and near success of this crime. After all, there is still a possibility of survival in this way. Isn't it? Chapter 70. The sculptor determines the murderer's hiding place and begins to act. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as these words came out, Lin Tian couldn't help but be silent and stunned. Didn't expect that at all. As the principal of Shid Middle School, the intellectual Qu Wenbiao actually said that he would rather believe in criminals with only a glimmer of hope. They don't believe and are willing to cooperate with the police. But think about it carefully. Lin Tian somewhat understood Qu Wenbiao's choice, because from his father's point of view, it was somewhat different and reasonable. After all, indeed, as Qu Wenbiao said, with what Chu Pengfei has done, if he is caught, he will definitely receive a peanut as the outcome. Count on criminals. Although it seems extreme, this is actually the only chance, only. With the behavior of this huge drug trafficking organization, this gambling opportunity is destined to fail, and his son will leave this world earlier. Su Chongsheng, on the other hand, couldn't stand Qu Wenbiao's attitude. That kind of indifference and giving up everything is simply more torture than interrogating a skinny dog, and it makes people more angry. He then slapped the table hard and said angrily. Qu Wenbiao. We are not only helping your son, we are also helping you, understand? You really think? Would a criminal who could commit such a major crime care about a loser like your son who didn't pass the test? I'll tell you straight. If you don't want to see your son's body in the next few days, then hurry up and tell us where he is hiding, otherwise. Before Su Chongsheng could finish speaking, Lin Tian saw Qu Wenbiao still lowering his head, seemingly completely indifferent, and then waved his hand to interrupt Su Chongsheng's subsequent words, shaking his head. Sheng. No more words. He has now concluded that his death was justified. Perhaps only when he sees the body with his own eyes will he regret not confessing earlier. We need to think about it on our own. Exactly where Chu Pengfei may be, then call the surveillance eye to verify, and try to find Chu Pengfei before they take action. Because it's not just this case. Chu Pengfei is also a key figure in breaking through this huge drug trafficking organization. We must ensure safety as much as possible. This moment, the entire interrogation room fell silent. Lin Tian lightly sniffed the smell of tobacco on his index finger, thinking about Chu Pengfei's possible location, while Su Chongsheng tapped on his laptop and checked the recent hotel stay information. Su Ming also leaned back comfortably on the chair and closed his eyes slightly. He tapped the back of his left hand with his right index finger and let himself think from Chu Pengfei's perspective. If he were Chu Pengfei, due to the particularity of the case and Qu Wenbiao's approach of taking the case directly on himself, it was impossible not to communicate with him in advance. So now I roughly know that my father was taken away by the police. After all, he was taken away in front of the media and there was no deliberate attempt to cover up anything. There is another possibility. That was Qu Wenbiao's deliberate decision to accept interviews with the media at that time, in order to let Chu Pengfei know whether he had been taken away by the police. After all, even with Su Chongsheng's warning, the media would inevitably mention Qu Wenbiao's being taken away online to gain popularity. That means Chu Pengfei should not be in school at the moment. because if it were at school, the news that Qu Wenbiao was taken away would definitely reach Chu Pengfei's ears immediately. And, if Chu Pengfei had been in school during this period, there is a high probability that he would have remembered the time of the 2-eye exercises instead of ringing in the phone call of Shou Go. This shows, Chu Pengfei probably only went to school once or twice by chance to have some necessary communication with Qu Wenbiao, so he happened to hear the eye exercises. The school can generally be ruled out. Qu Wenbiao also sold his house before and lived on campus, so it was impossible to live at home. It is undoubtedly even more impossible for places like hotels that require real name registration, so there are very few places to choose from. It must be concealed enough to not be easily discovered, and judging from the previous transactions between Chu Pengfei and Shougo, choosing to stay in Xingtian village shows that he is a person who needs a sense of security. Otherwise, he would not choose a place that he was extremely familiar with personally. As for, why is Chu Pengfei familiar with Xingtian village? That's because Qu Wenbiao and his wife were busy with work and had no time to take care of Chu Pengfei, so they left him to his grandparents. Think of this. Su Ming suddenly opened his eyes and suddenly thought of a detail. Chu Pengfei's grandparents passed away a few years ago, but the old house is still in Xingtian village, and it has not been demolished yet. The most important thing is, Chu Pengfei lived in an old house in Xingtian village during this period, so it was so easy to trade with Shougo. Otherwise, he must kill people in order to pass the examination of the drug trafficking organization. He must not dare to appear on the street many times during this period. This problem was solved by choosing the trading location in Xingtian village where he was hiding. At the same time, because Xingtian village has been basically abandoned and there are very few residents now, it is a good place to hide. And in Xingtian village, the only place Chu Pengfei can go is the old house left by his grandparents. But, there is basically no surveillance eye in Xingtian village, so an accurate verification is still needed. There was no hesitation. Su Ming quickly sat upright. Although he was looking in the direction of Lin Tian and Su Chongsheng, he was staring at Qu Wenbiao's expression from the corner of his eye, pretending to be surprised. Lin Bureau, Brother Sheng. I have determined where Chu Pengfei is. As soon as these words came out, Lin Tian and Su Chongsheng immediately stopped their thoughts and movements. While looking at Su Ming, they also looked at Qu Wenbiao with their peripheral vision. Can be seen, Qu Wenbiao, who had lowered his head in silence, quietly raised his head and listened carefully to the subsequent words with his ears raised. Su Ming did not deliberately pretend to be mysterious, nor did he have any foreshadowing. He directly spoke in an affirmative tone. Chu Pengfei. Currently hiding in the old house in Xingtian village left by his grandparents. The words fell, neither Lin Tian nor Su Chongsheng responded or said anything. Bang! Qu Wenbiao's fist suddenly hit the table of the interrogation chair weakly. His face was as pale as a dead man, and there was visible fear in his eyes. This moment, there is no need to look at the surveillance eye anymore. Qu Wenbiao's current expression and state are enough to explain everything. Lin Tian immediately stood up without hesitation. His eyes were cold and unquestionable. Send the police. Go to Xingtian village immediately and ask the surrounding police to help seal off the area. At the same time, at the entrance of an old residential area called Happy Home, a rather energetic young man wearing loose sportswear and a forehead hairband also carried a black backpack with 2 badminton rackets on his back. He walked out of the gate of the community with an expressionless face and a straight look, without even looking at the middle-aged man who was still in the ramen shop or the busy courier boy. Until after walking 2 streets, the young man took off his forehead bandage with some disgust, and his original spirit disappeared, leaving only a sickly decadence. Take out your mobile phone with a new phone card already installed. I sent a simple text message to the number that was deeply etched in my mind. Wait another 15 seconds. I have already reached the main road. Do you want to go to the trail to pick someone up? Not even a few seconds had passed, then I received a similarly short text message in response. The sculptor has found a doctor, so there is nothing to worry about and he will return to Suzhou as soon as possible. After seeing this text message, the young man stretched hard, hailed a taxi nearby and got in. He sat comfortably in the back and relaxed. Go to Modu bus station. And when the taxi took the young man away from the old city, within this half hour, the skinny dog wife kept hearing the barking of dogs. She looked suspiciously through the peephole of the security doors several times, and after confirming that no one was watching, she slowly opened the security door. Immediately afterwards, then she saw a Shiba Inu tied to the railing in front of her house by someone unknown, and it was still wagging its tail to please her. Just as the thin dog wife was looking around, she didn't understand why there was a Shiba Inu. The 3-year-old daughter ran out jumping up and down. When she saw the cute Shiba Inu, she immediately clapped her hands and shouted happily. Dog dog. Add a dog, add this dog.